Welcome to the Recruiter Startup Podcast. My name's Dualta, and in this podcast series, I will be interviewing investors, advisors, entrepreneurs, and recruiters who are based all over the world. Today, I'm speaking to Jamie Gardiner, who's based in West Hollywood. He's from the UK. He's been in recruitment since he graduated in 2010, and he has a great life in Los Angeles. And we got to find out how he managed to help the business set up in LA. He works for Vivid Resourcing, and they're a contract specialist IT recruitment firm in engineering. And he's had a few interesting jobs with them since joining as a graduate, and was given the opportunity to launch their US entity a couple of years back now, and did it from the London office, not even the office. He was in the basement of the office working LA hours, and as soon as he billed 150k, then they said, you know what, this is going to work. Let's get you out here. So he went out there, set up the office by himself. He now has a team of 12. They're killing it. He's got a great life. I'm jealous of it. I want to move out there right now, but I'm going to have to wait here for a few years. But I give you a taste of what it's like out there, what the market conditions are like, and Vivid's story and their rise to success out there. Let me know what you think, and please send the episode to another recruiter if you're enjoying it. And if this is the first time you're listening to this podcast, I think I'm close to doing about 30 now, and we've interviewed people from all over the world. Yesterday we had Greg Savage on, who might be the most famous person in our industry, so that was pretty cool. But I equally enjoyed speaking to Jamie, so over to Jamie. Jamie Gardiner, how are you today?
Afternoon, Dualta. Very well, thank you. And yourself?
Fantastic. The kids are in bed. They've stopped screaming. So it's that bit of peace and quiet. So I get to do this, which is great. Tell me, Where am I calling to?
You are currently dialing into West Hollywood in Los Angeles.
West Hollywood. Wow. That's not bad, hey?
Yeah, it's a good spot, to be honest. I think I was sort of given the opportunity to put a pin in the map, and glad I went for this location, and certainly a far cry from the grey and dreariness of London that I experienced for the best part of 6 years.
Well, let's jump into all that a little later. Bring me back to why you got into recruitment. Is it something you always dreamed of? Is it?
Yeah, ever since I was a little boy. No, I mean, I'm sure it's a consistent answer to everyone you speak with, but I suppose I sort of fell into it in essence. I graduated from uni in
What'd you study?
Liverpool.
What did you study?
I studied business and economics.
Okay. So you got a degree in common sense.
Yeah, exactly, something like that.
Yeah. I got the same.
Yeah. No, I really enjoyed my time in Liverpool. Spent 3 years there, and graduated in 2010. I then decided to take a year out and go traveling for a year. It took me over to South America, where I spent a year there, teaching football in a school, learning Spanish, and doing all the other good stuff, partying fairly hard, and really enjoying myself. Age 21.
And you went to Ecuador. Did you just go south from there?
So whilst I was in Ecuador, I was based there for 6 months, actually living there. I had an apartment there. Whilst I was living there, I did a lot of the traveling further south. So I managed to get down to Chile, to Peru. I've also got a brother who lives in Buenos Aires, so spent a little bit of time there. Once I actually packed up my apartment and got on the move from Ecuador, I headed north and spent time in Colombia and also a good month or 6 weeks in Venezuela, because I've got an auntie and uncle who at the time lived there. So,
fantastic.
Yeah, that was a really, really good year. Certainly look back on that fondly.
I spent about the same amount of time in Antigua, Guatemala.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, it's actually where we when the crash happened in Calgary, we moved. We had 6 months of savings, so we just moved back to the favorite place that we went to when we were traveling, and we made our first placement from there.
So, oh, nice! Yeah, that's a good place to do it from.
Yeah, it was good fun. So you, I'm guessing you didn't make your fortune teaching English in Ecuador. Did you?
No, certainly not. I mean, I wouldn't say I've quite made my fortune yet, but certainly things are going better than they were then.
So you went back to London, was it?
Went back to London, yeah, and obviously that feeling of touching down in London, back to my parents' house.
You're from London, are you?
No, I'm from just south of London in Kent.
Nice.
But you sort of kick your flip-flops off and then realise that life is about to get real, and it's time to start paying off some of the student loan and the debt you've just got yourself in whilst travelling, and that's when I needed a job quick, and obviously recruitment is typically quite good for that. I also had a couple of friends that were working for London-based agencies. I went to school with them, and
are they still in the game?
Yeah, one of them actually works for a company out here in Los Angeles. And one of them still works for an agency in London, so they've done really well for themselves. And they gave me a really candid appraisal of what recruitment was, what I was getting into, and what I could achieve. And for me, it was it was an exciting prospect. And I went through a rec to rec at the time and interviewed with a number of companies, and ended up taking a job with Vivid Resourcing.
What was your decision making process as a grad to choose Vivid?
So the decision-making process actually, it developed a hell of a lot throughout the process. I think going into it, I was quite green, and again was just focused on getting a job. And I think I had about 4 or 5 final stage interviews with various different agencies, and it came down to 2 in the end. And I'd had an interview with S3, Computer Futures brand of S3. They're based in Green Park, and I'd actually, as I say, I was a bit green, and they closed me in the interview and got me to sign, and I was due to start there the following Monday.
10 grand a year.
Yeah, something like that. And I'd already had a chat with Charlie Walker, who was the founder and managing director of Vivid Resourcing, and I'd had a really good chat with him, and they were 2 completely different opportunities. It was chalk and cheese. Vivid.
Tell us about Charlie's background.
So Charlie, yeah, really interesting background. Try not to big him up too much in case he hears this, but he was an Oxford grad, graduated from Oxford with a degree in economics and politics, and joined G2, who are the sister company of Vivid. Joined G2 in Bristol in 2004. I think in part because his now wife was in Bristol for study or work, and he was taken to Bristol and was looking to find some a fairly short-term job. Little did he know he'd become one of the most successful in the industry and build a career out of it. But he had a really interesting background. Obviously, not too many Oxford grads decide to go into recruitment, and he went into it with an open mind and succeeded.
Okay.
Really, really well, and exponential growth in his career. And he then, after 4 years at G2, set up Vivid Resourcing, which essentially formed the G2V group, and he set it up out of the London headquarters. What I really liked about Charlie at the time was like his ambition was just so striking. I mean, there was only 10 employees at the time when I interviewed with him, but the numbers that he was talking and the growth strategy that he was talking was so huge. And I think ultimately that was what pulled me towards Vivid. It was the opportunity to join an and be, part of something quite special. And I also walked into a seriously elite room. Out of those 10, I think 5 of them were billing in excess of £500,000 in a pretty difficult market at the time. Charlie actually set up Vivid in 2008, so not at the time you would anticipate people wanted to set up a recruitment company. I mean, it was right bang in the middle of the recession, but
your contract focused business, right?
It was it still is I mean, it's padded out a little bit more with the perm, but it's a contract business essentially. And I think at the time that I joined, there were about 100, maybe 120 runners. Now in excess of 400 or 500, so fairly exponential growth in that sense.
Wow. Okay. So you're in an early stage startup. What was the environment like? And you're in London. Are you working all the time? You're in a room full of top performing contract recruiters? It's like a den of wolves. It must be.
Yeah, I mean, it was an interesting environment. I think one of the.
Am I being too hard on contract recruiters?
No, I mean, it really is a pack of wolves. And yeah. One of the culture traits that I think Charlie developed, and it's something that I've really held on to when I've built teams and built offices, is a culture of competitiveness, yes, but also collaboration. So you can be competitive as hell and want to be top of the board, but that doesn't mean that you're not willing to give a helping hand to someone who sits next to you or someone who's new to the business. And that really was that's how I would describe that environment. Like I say, there was 10 of us when we joined, and it was deeply competitive and elite.
How do you foster that?
Well, I think it's got to come from the top down, really. It's not something that typically, recruiters by our nature can be quite selfish and have our eyes on our own earnings and our own prizes. But I think it's just a culture that comes from the top down, and you ingrain it in the workplace, but also socially, and just try and develop, a sort of us against the world mentality. There was a lot of discussion about how we wanted to beat G2, our sister company. There was a lot of discussion about how we didn't want to be, just another agency. We didn't want, there was a lot of talk about how we wanted to be better than the big Michael Pages or the Hayes or whatever. And that fostered the mentality of like, we are a pack of wolves against, the other agencies essentially. And it was
so you had a Mourinho type complex.
Something like that.
Yeah.
Charlie wouldn't like that.
It's really good, interesting point how offices can foster that. I was in a top performing room in Robert Walters in Perth, and it was all I'd ever experienced. And I went to a boutique search firm in Calgary when the market crashed, and I remember, even though the market was crashing, the lights went out at 5 p.m. Like everybody was like, "Oh, no, we're just switching off the office lights now," and I was like, this isn't going to work out.
Yeah, that's certainly not what it was like in my early days at Vivid. But again, it was quite an adult and mature culture. Like if you wanted to leave at 5 o'clock or at 5:30, I think was our contracted hours, then no one's going to block you walking out the door. But you'd be told in no uncertain terms that that sort of performance has a shelf life in terms of success. Like you can do that, but you're not. Do you want to do this job? So there was some pretty heavy hitting hours in those days, and in terms of the intensity and like the business development levels that we went through, certainly I still hold that as the most intense period of my career.
It's hard to keep that type of intensity up your whole career, I think because you're learning at that time as well, so you've all that there stress. Did you get the recruitment dreams when you were starting?
Yeah, it's funny. A lot of the people that I hire now talk about that, and I do remember it. It's hard to relate to that right now.
Yeah,
so long, but
you become numb to it after a while. You say.
Yeah, but no, certainly I remember it. You have dreams about pitching and whatnot. It's a baptism of fire. I'm sure it's the first 6 months in that job were just, you learn so much. It's so intense. you're obviously having to, well, not having to, but you're enjoying all of the social aspects that go along with being a 21-year-old recruiter in a big city as well. So the whole thing is just, you know, a life experience that I won't forget. And
It's great you got such an early start at it. I only got into it when I was 27.
Yeah.
Tell me, what's the difference between a temp recruiter and a perm recruiter when you see them? Like, what really sets apart, like when you see somebody, you go, this guy's going to be an excellent temp recruiter?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's something I've thought about a lot. I mean, I now manage an office that is primarily on the perm side in LA, and was I think I only ever did a couple of perm deals in the UK. So it's been a bit of a sea change for me. I think if you've got you know, a passion for it and you're good at your job, then contract recruiters, there is that like burning impatience and tenacity and drive to get it done and get it over the line that maybe you don't see in a perm recruiter. A perm recruiter is maybe more willing to, you know, collaborate with the client and, you know, nurture the relationship. A contract recruiter is, you know, smells blood and makes it happen. And I'd say that it's that like tenacity and impatience from a contract recruiter that gets things done.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. Do you see any difference in the pace in the American market to the UK market?
Well, one thing that we enjoy so much of here on a perm market is, I don't know how much you know about the US employment intricacies, but essentially everyone's employed at will here. So notice periods are not a thing. You can walk out of a job or be released from a job in the space of an hour. So when we touched down in LA, and we started hitting a perm market, mainly because we were a startup. Although we were part of a larger infrastructure, we were a startup in the, to get cash in the bank, you typically turn to perm. And we realized pretty quickly that everyone was employed at will and there was no notice period, and things can move so quickly in that sense. So the professional courtesy that even a very senior member of staff will give their employer is 2 weeks. So, you know, that's a real benefit to this market. You can have someone interviewing for a $300,000 job, and you've got 25-30% agree with the client, and he could be at his desk in 2 weeks, and you could be sending the invoice.
That's crazy.
So well, it's nuts. In the UK, you're looking at 3 months, 6 month notice periods for those jobs. So that's been a big part of facilitating our growth, to be honest.
Yeah, we'll jump into that a bit more. I probably shouldn't have taken you so far forward. Tell me, so you're getting into recruitment, you're getting good at it, you're figuring it out a little bit. What was your first big break in it? Was it an office setup?
My first
was
big
it
break.
A team?
Yeah, I mean, my first big break was really like my own individual billings. Like, I had a really rapid start. Not to say I didn't have my issues a little bit further down the line, but as a biller, I was working in some international markets, and I think I was 10 contractors out after 6 months, but billing around £8,500. So, you know, I was billing upwards of £30,000 a month, 6 months in. And that was just due to some of the big wins I had overseas. Like, I remember 2 of my first 5 or 6 deals were in Thailand, and that was with a Dutch company, a site in Thailand, and I just got a real taste for international recruitment. I loved the fact that I was dealing with different cultures, and I loved quite simply the money that you could earn in those markets compared to a pretty saturated UK contract market. So it was, my billings were a big break initially, and then as a result of that, I was given the opportunity to manage very early on in my career. I think I was only about a year in to my career at Vivid when my direct manager gave me the opportunity to mentor my first hire. Initially, as a recruiter, and if you're billing well, for me personally, there was a little bit of reticence to going into management. You wonder about whether you have the time to still bill. You wonder about whether you've achieved everything you can as a biller. But it was my manager who sort of forced it upon me and said, look, the way we do things here is we'll make you do things before you're ready, and you will prosper for it. And I think that that opportunity to manage so early was a huge sort of opportunity for me, and something that I grasped and enjoyed and have grown as a result.
So the international stuff you were doing, were you specialised in a certain vertical? How does that happen? You phone up somebody in Holland and you say, hey, I've got a contractor who might be of interest to you. How do you win business doing that remotely?
So I mean, first of all, we pitched ourselves as market specialists in the Dutch market. Whether or not that was a fair reflection of how specialist we were at the time, we certainly sold ourselves as that adequately. And I think one of the benefits was it was a much less saturated market, and that's what really excited me. We were placing engineering folks, anything from mechanical engineers, electrical engineers, planning engineers, within markets like automotive, aerospace, maybe some nuclear stuff. So it was relatively broad, but we were selling ourselves as a market specialist in the Netherlands. I think, to be honest, part of the success of international recruitment in a place like that is the curiosity of a client. They're not getting pitched 10 times a day by UK-based recruiters. They're not maybe fully aware of the service that you're offering off the back of one call. So their interest levels are quite high. And there was a skill shortage as well. There was a huge skill shortage of engineers, and there was a interest to see what we could deliver both locally in terms of engineering resource, but also relocating contractors from the UK and Ireland and the like. Typically there's a lot of respect for British engineers, and we certainly placed a huge number of them in the Netherlands.
And in terms of the insurances to do that, was that held in house? Was that outsourced if it was overseas? What's the complexities of running an international contract business?
So again, that was also one of the the things that really drew me to Vivid, and the exciting project that we were embarking on, the opportunity to learn about a different business culture, and particularly in the Netherlands, like they're very hot on compliance and perceived tax evasions and everything like that. So we had to really have our house in order. In terms of our sort of in-house payroll and everything like that, we outsourced it to two companies in particular who were like third-party umbrella companies. We had a contract with them. They would contract with our contractor, and there would be a contract between all three flowing down. So we basically paid a percentage of our margin to a third party who could handle all of the local employment laws and tax affairs.
Even with, because I know like oil and gas contract recruitment, one slip on an oil rig finishes Vivid and G2 and like did they handle all the insurances on that as well?
Yeah, so they would handle that, but we would handle that via a third party as well. I mean, we actually initially our international business wasn't oil and gas focused, but as oil and gas boomed in, I suppose it must have been 2013 maybe off the top of my head, of course we saw that as a huge opportunity to jump on that, and myself and my team started doing a lot more business, not just in the Netherlands but also in Norway, in Oslo and Stavanger, which was Aberdeen of Norway essentially, and there was huge business to do there.
Fantastic.
We were billing £2,000 a week off some contractors, and it really was an exciting time. And you're right to reference like the insurances and compliance of oil and gas. Like some agencies I know sort of treated it a little bit like the Wild West, and did get their fingers burnt a little bit by not being diligent and compliant. As a recruiter at the time, I probably would have liked to have gone down that route, but we had fairly stringent policies in place to make sure that we were protected, and Like I say, all insurance. You know, we had a lot of people offshore, so you can't mess with that stuff. Like I say, one thing goes wrong and it's enough to blow everything up in smoke.
Yeah, I just know. I just remember from being in Perth whenever the boom was happening. So there was plenty of chat around that. And Charlotte wasn't internal recruiter for Chevron at the time, so I probably got a bit of sight into what her role was like dealing with all the agencies and that for them. So that boom ended 2015, but you guys weren't too heavily leveraged in that space, were you? You had
Not particularly, but it was a key. The end of the oil and gas boom was a key moment in my career and how I ended up to where I was today. Because we had our AGM in May 2015, and as a result of the oil and gas boom in the previous year or two, we had grown exponentially beyond where we thought we would get to, and probably beyond the sort of growing pains we could handle operationally at the time. To be honest, we went from billing £3 million a year as an office to 6 million in the space of a year. So 100% growth over the course of a year, and it was a really, really exciting time. It was an inspiring time, and it was a time where, to be crass about it, we all cleaned up and we earned shed loads of money. The end of that boom was, I think, for a lot of recruiters, a little bit of a reality check. It was, it got a little bit easy in that oil and gas boom, and it was a reality check and a correction in the market, if you like, and now an opportunity to yourself again in a different market, because there really was nothing going on in that market by the end of that time. I mean, you would get laughed at if you were pitching an oil and gas manager at times. So
we were in Perth. I think I've mentioned this before in this podcast, but we were in Perth in the boom, and we were earning shed loads of money, me and Charlotte, and we thought, well, the iron ore piece is slowing down a bit. We'll get to Calgary. We'll earn even more in Calgary because that's the epicenter of oil and gas. My first day over there, that market crashed.
Oh, great! Yeah. Just what you need.
It was horrendous. So yeah, it was it was a different reality. You know, when you're in the middle of those booms, it's pretty it's a great place. It's great to be a recruiter in a boom market. There's nothing better. So you'd experienced the taste of a boom, and I'm guessing your head started thinking, I want to get the taste of whatever's next out there. Is that right? Is that where your head went?
Yeah, so it was after that AGM in May 2015. I was having a pint with Charlie, and we were just discussing, actually, look, we're market to market, we follow market trends. We've got international offices in Europe. Like, how do we take this company from 6 million to 9 million? How do we grow at the same pace? And we decided that the States was the one place that we hadn't touched. We had done a little bit of business with existing European clients who we had serviced out here, and I just said immediately, like, I'll do it. I'll go there and I'll set it up. Like, I had no concern or fear about a different market, a different culture. I'd experienced that a little bit with my time in the London office, working in different verticals. And for me, like, I really wanted to do something a bit more entrepreneurial, start something from scratch, but I didn't necessarily want to leave Vivid as well. I had a lot of respect for the company and the values that we had endorsed, and
you've a good infrastructure system set up as well.
What's that?
You've a good infrastructure to build your own success through them.
Exactly. So it was the opportunity to be part of a startup, but with the sort of operational and of a much larger infrastructure. So
walk us through how you scoped it out.
So that was about mid 2015. Towards the end of 2015, we hired someone in from S3 who was an operations manager, specifically working on the strategic movement into the US. S3 have been successful out here. We work well to go and poach some resource that had, been involved in setting up offices and the operational sort of incorporating the business and everything. So we started ramping up pretty quickly towards the end of 2015, which left us in a position where we incorporated just before Christmas, or Christmas 2015, and I started trading January 2016 from the basement of our London office, which was quite an interesting concept because, we had the resources and the infrastructure just sent me out there. I could have a team, we weren't short of cash as a business, but both Charlie and CEO James Gardiner, CEO of G2V Group, they had both set up their businesses from scratch. James Gardiner in his bedroom, Charlie Walker on his own in a little shack in London, and they wanted me to go through that period.
They wanted you to earn it
on my own. Yeah, exactly. Wanted me to want it as well. Wanted me to really go through that startup experience.
All right. There's a bit of a time difference between LA and London. What hours were you working?
Well, I was getting in probably about midday, doing some stuff on the East Coast for the first part of my day, and I was getting home at 11 o'clock at night, midnight. I would often do a few tins at my desk during the sales session, and at times I even had to set my alarm for 2-3 in the morning to take a client call, which my wife, or my girlfriend at the time, was best pleased about, of course.
Well, if she knew what was good for her, she was getting to move to America, so she better shut up and get on with it. Hey?
Yeah, well, that's it.
She won't be listening to this. It'll be okay. Right. So you start getting. At what point does Charlie come to you and say, "All right, okay, you've earned it"? Like, what did that look like in terms of revenue, in terms of plan?
Yeah, I think from memory, so from that January to April, we were still, or the end of March, sorry, we're still working on a UK fiscal year here. So from that January to the end of March, I think we did about $175,000 off the bat from a standing start. It was in a reasonably good place, and at that stage we said, like we know this is going to work. Let's get moving. And it then took about 3 months, 4 months to just tie up stuff. I had a house in London that I owned that I had to rent out. It was a big move for myself and my wife. I actually got married that summer as well, so that was part of it. I was waiting to not get that out of the way, but we're waiting for the marriage for the wedding to conclude, and then I think we pushed the button and got out here August 2016.
Okay.
So
early days out here, you're obviously used to running a remote business. Do you decide to start meeting clients, or do you stick to what's worked before?
No, absolutely. I've never met so many clients as I did in the first 6 to 12 months when we set up in LA. Initially, it was just myself in a tiny little Regis service office on Sunset Boulevard. To be fair, it was a beautiful location, not the nicest office, but I've never met so many clients. I really sort of targeted myself on meeting as many as possible. I didn't have any people reporting into me. It was just about me developing my own business at the time. And sales here is such a more respected industry. There is so much less transactional than it is in the UK or even parts of Central Europe. They really value what they would refer to as a partnership clients, and it's a relationship that you can really foster. So I was out and about meeting as many clients as I could, and built some really good client relationships very, very early on for that reason. Okay,
so you're starting to build an office. What was your greatest challenge?
I'd say that the greatest challenge that I had, my first few hires were Brits. I had a guy, Dan Gorn, join me as our head of technology from our London office, and then I hired a couple of Brits from UK agencies. And I think that one of the things you have to to drill into people is like, yes, it's a great market, and the reason they've come out here is because they build loads of money. But you know, we're not reinventing the wheel. We're not actually doing anything that different. I mean, there's intricacies that you have to work out within the market, but I'm a little bit more old school, where I still think the phone's your biggest tool. You know, the obsession with social media and all of that stuff. I mean,
podcast and stupid things like that.
Yeah, but when it comes to a billing perspective, you know, it was about drilling into them that, look, you know, this market is you know, at times a license to print money, but don't let the basics suffer. You know, make sure that we're still doing things in the same way that we would do a really competitive, saturated, tenacious market. So it was about sort of trying to just drill that into people and maybe make them aware that, you know, they're not actually on holiday, to be honest.
Yeah, I suppose expat recruitment can be a bit like that, but I suppose you've got good experience in setting up high activity rooms from really your starting recruitment, and getting that energy into the room must have been a tough thing. Is there anything that you put into the day to make sure that that you know, everybody's starting in the right way and, you know, like focused?
Yeah. We're a team of 12 now. I've not down tools at all. I'm still the top biller in the room, and I'm still doing my best to lead from the front in terms of my business development. And we break our days into. I understand these days that there's acquisition in very tight markets, and a lot of the time that might be done on LinkedIn or other social medias where you're pinging people basically, and you might not have that real phone activity. But that's why we break down into you know, quite aggressive business development sessions each morning for 3 hours, where essentially everyone's job is to pull new business. It's not a case of ringing around your existing clients. There's enough time to do that in the day. It's about pulling in new business every day, because otherwise, other than your numbers on the board, like, what value have you added during that day?
How do you target them on that? Do they come up with that list themselves? Do you give it to them? What does that look like to make sure that they're looking through the internet aimlessly?
Yeah, well, there is a lot of that if you're not careful. You're right on that one. No, I mean, I think we work in very tight vertical markets. Like, the way we work is we really try and assess where we can actually add value to the market, you know, where there's a candidate shortage, and where we can break down doors as a result. So for our tech team, for example, they spend a lot of their time finding some very niche candidates that are marketable, and then their business development session will be reversing them into companies and hiring managers that are going to have a shortage of that type of staff.
What type of places are they looking for these niche candidates? It's not just LinkedIn, hey?
No, I mean, the tech team particularly have a few other sort of different social mediums. I think I'm not too tech savvy, to be honest, but I think LinkedIn, along with GitHub and various other sort of tech social medias. We also do have access to a number of job boards. To be honest, they're not quite as I don't find them quite as prevalent here as they are in
I think
the UK.
I think job boards are dying everywhere, though. You know.
Yeah, I think so.
So a common problem, and the reason I'm in business, is UK companies struggle to get Americans to fit into their model. What have you done to accommodate that, to make that work? I know you only have 12 at the moment. I'm sure there's the odd local there.
So we've got 12. There's 6 Brits and 6 Americans. You know, I am really committed to building a US business as a subsidiary of a UK entity. You know, I don't want it to just be a room of British recruiters. Of course, British recruiters have had great success here, not just in our company, but there's a number of companies in America where they've succeeded. So I'd be mad not to tap into that resource, particularly as a lot of them would want to move to LA. But you're right, there is a bit of a culture difference. I think some of the Americans And I've not lost any staff for the record in 2 years. So that's something I'm quite proud of. I've not had anyone leave as yet.
They'll all go at the same time. That always
well,
happens.
this is, yeah, I know. I'll wake up one day and I'll have full resignation from my desk. That's why you've always got to hire.
Yeah.
But so we piecing together the culture is not easy, and I think at times local staff can find it a little bit hard hitting. What British recruiters are like. It's intense, and it's it's not for the faint-hearted. So it's about finding people that have the ambition and the balls, for want of a better word. We have hired some really good local staff. We've also found we've had quite good success hiring people from the East Coast who have experienced a few rough winters in Boston or Maryland or the like. But essentially, it's I think it's really important at interview stage. We have a really extensive interview where they meet the whole team. They do a phone trial on the sales floor. We then take them out for lunch. We'll probably go out for beers with them that night. So we give them like a day in the life of our office before they commit, and we try and make them as informed as possible before. And at the moment, we've got a great culture. We've got a culture of quite intense competition, but everyone really gets on. There's a really strong team ethos, and everyone's pulling towards a common goal as well as an individual one.
Talk to me about visas. Everybody gives different information. In your view, if you're a UK recruiter, what do you have to do what do you have to be experience-wise, education and work record to get over there?
Yeah, first of all, like don't believe the scaremongering that gets released on industry press or that you hear on the grapevine. Like I don't see any particular issue or reduction in the visas for recruiters. I think in terms of experience levels, if you have a bachelor's degree, and this isn't a prerequisite for me because I don't care about anyone's degree when it comes to recruitment. I've hired people with and without, with varying success. But from an immigration standpoint, if you have a bachelor's degree and 2 years minimum, ideally 3, then we can get you a visa. If you don't have a bachelor's, then typically we like to buffer that experience level just more towards the 4+ years, just to give us a little bit more leverage when it comes to the application. But certainly we're not particularly concerned by any updates in the E2 visa status, and we're open to hiring people from with sponsorship as soon as possible.
You're not going to get rich in 1 year, though, are you?
No, but you can make good money in 1 year. You can definitely make good money in 1 year. We've got one guy who started in February who up and running. He's billed 200 grand, invoiced 200 grand already, and he earned an 18 grand paycheck last month. So there's definitely scope to earn well in your first year. But as was with our UK model, really, it's the second year that we always say is the big hitting one. We would expect an individual biller to earn 150 grand in year 2. And with that, you then have a bit of a fork. I have no issue if you just want to bill and sit there and develop your own business because you want to selfishly just concentrate on your own earnings. Equally, I'll probably push you towards scale of business, and if you want to start managing, then we'll let people do it as soon as they want. To be honest, if they've got the numbers to back it up.
What does the future hold for you in terms of where you think you'd like to see the business be in 3 years from now, 5 years from now?
So at the end of this year, we at the moment we're at 12 staff, and we're going to do $3 million as an office by the year end, which is UK fiscal year, so March 2019. In 3 years' time, really, I think we'd want to be north of 7 million as gross profit, and we'd want to have a workforce of around about 30 staff. The real aim is to double in size in terms of our revenue and headcount as soon as possible. I think the ambition in me tells me I can do it in a year to 18 months, but the realist in me says that might take closer to 2.5 years.
Is is the ultimate business objective to get acquired by a larger business, or what is Vivid's ultimate goal?
I think as a group, the G2V group has fairly long-standing ambitions to be acquired. There isn't a particular time frame on that at the moment. I think myself and the UK directors feel that there's a huge amount of growth still within every aspect of the business.
Yeah.
And I think that's something for maybe a little bit further down the line. But of course, we're going to be an attractive proposition for anyone that is looking to buy a recruitment company, to be honest.
So talk to me about you have a really busy recruitment life, but you've just had a kid. You're married. What's it like? What's it like living in LA with all that stuff going on? Is it just as good for a guy with a wife and kids as it is for the single recruiter who moves out? Or
well, yeah, to be honest, I mean, for anyone listening who's considering a move to one thing I'd say about LA is it's not just an opportunity to go and work somewhere for a year or two and then tap out. It is a career choice and a life choice. The lifestyle in LA is incredible. You get 350 days sunshine a year. There's, whether you're into sports or hiking or surfing or windsailing, any sort of outdoor activity you can do all day, every day. It's a really exciting market to work in. We work in emerging technologies where it's the place to be. You can travel in California. There's endless holiday destinations, weekend on weekend. In terms of me personally, it's certainly been a busy couple of years. Obviously, setting up the business, and then I had a little girl 5.5 months ago. Her name's Melissa. So
very good.
She was born in Cedar Sinai, Beverly Hills, and is now a US citizen, which is pretty exciting. And yeah, it's a great place to bring up a family. Like I say, we live in West Hollywood, which is an incredibly safe and clean and culturally diverse and liberal environment. So I couldn't champion this lifestyle enough, to be honest, Dualta. And that's whether you're 22 years old and single and you just want to tear it up and bill as much as you can and live weekend to weekend, or whether you want to put down serious roots and build a family here. There really is something for everyone in this part of the world.
And tell me, it feels to me like there's a new recruitment company from the UK setting up every quarter in LA. Are you bumping into a lot of these guys? Are you like on my travels? Are you playing in the same football team as them, or is it?
Yeah, so you're right. I've noticed a lot of competition sprouting up in the last, particularly 6 to 12 months.
Yeah, it's been crazy, right?
Yeah. I mean,
God bless it.
Yeah, but yeah, there is a football team down in Santa Monica that I played on with a couple of the guys from GQR and a couple of lads from Console Partners. Actually, like a really decent outfit, to be honest. We were pretty successful. I think we're in a little bit of a holding pattern before the next season starts. But you go to similar bars, similar restaurants. During the World Cup, any English bar you went to, there was full of British recruiters. So there's definitely a bit of a trodden path and a bit of a scene here where you bump into people from different companies. So it's good. Long may it continue, because obviously it's success generally.
Oh well, I hope it all keeps up. We're planning on moving out ourselves once we get through this baby stage here.
Really?
So
yeah, business for you with all of startups in LA. It's not a hard sell.
We're hanging in there, so it's all good. But look, thanks so much for coming on and telling us all about your journey and your life out there. It sounds really, really exciting. And as I look towards this long winter in the UK that's coming up, I'm pretty envious. So,
well, I'm sure you'll be out here soon, Dualta, and let me know when you are, and we'll catch up for a bit.
All right. Thanks, pal. Catch you later.
Thanks. Take care. Bye-bye.
Well, big thanks to Jamie for coming on. What a great lad, and what a good decision he made getting into recruitment and working his ass off to first become a top performer and then a top manager, and then gambling on himself to set up the US entity for Vivid. Now he's going to be front and center of a business that may be floated for a sale down the road, and he'll have greatly contributed to that profit share. So as a young man, he could be involved in an exit down the road. And these are the best scenarios you can get into as a recruiter. You know, anybody could do what I'm doing and have a little lifestyle business and, you know, do a few placements a month and have a good life. But if you want to make baller money, if you want to make real money in this game, join a business that's scaling and scaling with the view to be sold at some stage in the future and become a major player within that business. And the payout that you will get will set you up for whatever you want to do in the future. So I hope you all enjoyed that. And if you're listening to this and you want to get to LA, hit me up. We're doing lots of work there. Or if you're listening to this and you want to come on the podcast and tell your story, whether you're a recruitment founder or a software salesperson within recruitment or whatever it is, as long as you're a bit of crack and you are within our world of agency recruitment, then connect with me on LinkedIn, hit me up, and we'll have a chat. All right, till tomorrow, I think. So good luck, God bless, and take care.
The podcast you just heard was published with Anchor. Got something you want to say to the creator of this show? Send them a voice message using the Anchor app, free for iOS and Android.